Yeah, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let's give like 2 minutes for more people to join in so that we can start our meeting. I kindly request. Okay, so good afternoon once again, ladies and gentlemen. You are all welcome to the meeting today about filovirus preparedness and readiness. As you are all aware, or most of you are aware, we've had outbreaks of filoviruses in the recent past. Specifically, we've had Marburg outbreak in Tanzania, Marburg outbreak in Rwanda. We have had Ebola outbreak in Uganda. And several countries are prone to this because we know that diseases are no longer bound by borders. There's a lot of trans-border travel, and any of the neighboring countries and beyond could be affected by this disease. But we also know that better preparedness, better readiness enables the country to handle the outbreak timely and effectively. So we thought it our humble duty to engage with you colleagues and discuss this whole issue of filovirus disease or VHF disease, preparedness and readiness. So in this meeting, we'll provide information to you and we'll take questions from you about how we can be better prepared and ready to handle a filovirus outbreak. Next slide. Before we start, I want us to note that this virtual meeting adheres to the Code of Conduct to prevent and respond to sexual misconduct, including sexual harassment, abuse, and exploitation in line with WHO principles. For guidance, all participants have access to the show captions. If you look down on your screen, there's where it says show captions. There's also Q&A, chat, reactions, and raise hand. If you wish to take the floor during the Q&A period, you raise your hand and the moderator will invite you to talk. And when you're going to talk, you activate your phone, your microphone, so that we can hear you. So microphone will be open for you to talk, or you will be able to activate it when you are selected to make a question or a comment. Next. There is the Q&A part there up. It is very important because this is where you are going to type your questions. Only questions in the Q&A will be answered during the sessions. Please put all your questions here. Responses may occur live during the event or can be written as answers. Keep checking, or can also be responded to and sent to members later, but use that Q&A. There's also a chat feature. The chat, you'll use it for general introductions and other issues regarding IT or logistics. The chat can also be used by presenters to share important links, documents, or contact information, but you'll be informed about this. You can also keep an eye on the chat. Next, we have interpretation services in English and French. If you need interpretation to French or to English, you go to that button on interpretation and you click in and select the language that you would want to hear. And if you select the language that you want to hear that is different from the person that is speaking, you mute the original audio so that you can hear very well. Yeah. We need to also note that if the interpretation of proceedings is really to facilitate communication and does not constitute an authentic or verbatim record of the proceedings. So the interpreter tries to interpret to the best of his or her listening in order to facilitate communication. Next. Show caption. Click on show options and the caption would appear. And to close on caption, you click on hide caption. That is how to use the show captions. And it can show you to the best of their capacity what the person is saying. Next. Recordings. Kindly note, by participating in this meeting, whether as a participant or panelist, we take your permission to record your contributions, and we'll share these recordings via different channels for continuous learning. Session materials, including presentations and the recordings as well, will be shared with the participants days following the webinar. Next. Now I'll take you quickly through the agenda. We'll have epidemiology of the filoviruses and current state. Then we'll go through the essential and actionable measures for enhancing country preparedness. This is one of the key presentations. And then the readiness recommended actions for countries by pillar, so that you can have an idea of what the countries need to put in place. We'll have a Q&A session, and then a session on next steps for enhancing readiness. And then we'll close hopefully by 2 p.m. So with that, I will call upon the next presentation, and let's begin. Over to you, Sam Boland. Sorry, we start with the Maury. Over to you, Maury.
Yeah.
Yes.
Amarachi, could you please share the slides? Okay, let's start. Thank you very much, Dr. Miriam. Once again, welcome to all participants, wherever they may be. It's always a real pleasure talk about filovirus epidemics in the African region, because this subject has fascinated me since the Ebola disease outbreak in West Africa. Slide. So before talking about filovirus epidemics, it's important to recall just how vulnerable the WHO African region is to health emergencies. As you can see on this slide, the WHO African region has the highest burden of infectious disease of any region in the world. Emerging and re-emerging infectious disease continue to be reported in the region every year. For instance, the Afro region was monitoring like 88 events, including 57 epidemics and 32 humanitarian crises on 2nd of February. Slide. Talking of epidemics, this graph, although a little bit old, shows us the most affected countries. And I can reassure you that the same countries that were in the lead almost 10 years ago are still in the lead. As you can see, the DRC is the first country reporting epidemics, followed by Nigeria, then by Uganda, Ghana, and Kenya. This can be interpreted like in a different way. Firstly, it could be due to the country's vulnerability to epidemics. Secondly, it could be also due to a surveillance system that sometimes maybe pick up even late, but it could be. And thirdly, it could be due to the diagnostic capacity in place in the countries. For example, if the country have capacity to test, of course, they will report more epidemics than those who are not able to test some samples. Slide. So when discussing Ebola epidemics, it's important to note that globally, there have been 49 outbreaks since 1976. Over 85% of them in Africa, as you can see on this map. In all, these epidemics have resulted in a total of nearly 35,000 cases, including 15,000 deaths. Either a global case fatality rate of 44%. But if you look at on the graph below, you will see that a total of, it's not maybe, it's not very well readable because of the size of the maps, but a total of 26 Ebola epidemics have been reported between 2010 and 2025 up to now, compared to 11 epidemics between 1999 and 2010. So either a doubling in the number of epidemics. This does not necessarily, go back, please. So go back, please. This does not necessarily means that there have been like more epidemics in the last 15 years, but it could be certainly maybe linked to improved surveillance and the diagnostic capacity. Now we have gene experts, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, this was not available. So this could also be one of the interpretation of the number of the epidemics detected over the last 15 years. But the question is, when these epidemics will end? But nobody knows that. Next slide. So as far as Marburg is concerned, the total number of epidemics is certainly lower than Ebola, of course, because we only reported 19 epidemics worldwide since 1967. So, but almost 80% of all these epidemics are reported in Africa. More than 700 cases have been reported, including more than 500 deaths, for an overall case fatality rate of 75%. But if you look at the number of cases, 95% of the cases have been reported in Africa, because the imported cases reported in European countries are few, very few. I think the observation is almost the same for Ebola. So Marburg epidemics continue to strike Africa. An illustrative example is the recent occurrence of two Marburg epidemics in two different countries within 3 months, Rwanda and Tanzania. Slide. So, like all infectious disease epidemics, filovirus epidemics transcend national borders, as mentioned by Dr. Miriam, meaning that filovirus epidemic do not respect borders. The spread of the Ebola epidemics in West Africa is an example. So preparedness is needed regardless of where the epidemic is located in Afro region. So what I'm saying here is that it's not because the Marburg epidemic is in Tanzania or the Sudan virus epidemic is in Uganda, so Guinea should not prepare. Slide. An unusual link between two Marburg virus disease epidemics in two different West African countries, the 2022 Marburg in Ghana and the 2021 in Guinea, is a clear evidence that all countries, particularly those at risk, need to be prepared at all times. The strangest thing was that neither the index patient of the 2022 Marburg virus disease outbreak in Ghana nor his close contact had a history of travel or had contact with returning travelers from Guinea. However, the genome of this virus were found to be more than 98% related to the 2021 Guinea Marburg sequence. However, it's also important to note that this 2021 Marburg case in Guinea and the 2022 Marburg case in Ghana are two different branches that diverged in 2017. This suggests two different spillover events between Guinea and Ghana, but probably due to close reservoir. Slide. Now trying to maybe make a quick update on the Uganda's ongoing outbreak of Sudan virus disease. And as of February, as of 10th of February, I think Uganda Ministry of Health reported 9 cases, including 1 death. Slide. The genomic, very important. Now I think we are able to do genomic characterization of all the filovirus epidemics. So the recent genomic characterization of this outbreak in Uganda shows that the current outbreak is not a continuation of the 2022 transmission chain and does not support the hypothesis of persistent human-to-human transmission from convalescent individual or undetected subclinical cases. Instead, maybe the strong phylogenetic relationship with the 2012 Luero lineage raised the possibility of shared epidemiological origin, potentially maybe involving a common zoonotic reservoir, as I was just mentioning for Guinea and Sierra Leone, maybe Guinea and Ghana, sorry, or an independent spillover event, rather than a direct viral lineage continuation from previous known outbreaks. Slide. The key takeaway from this presentation for you, colleague, a participant, is that, sorry, go back. Predicting precisely when and where filovirus outbreak will emerge is difficult. But these historical outbreaks make one thing clear: the African region is particularly susceptible and bound to be regularly affected. Filovirus epidemics transcend borders, meaning preparedness is essential. Diagnostic capabilities must be maintained to ensure rapid detection of these epidemics. Lastly, but not the least, regular training and CIMEX are needed to enhance preparedness and test readiness capacity. Thank you very much for your attention. Over to you, Dr. Miriam.
Thank you very much, Maury, for that very informative presentation. As you have heard, the filovirus outbreaks seem to be with us here in Africa. We cannot tell with accuracy when they will occur and where they will occur. We have reservoirs that have these viruses, and it takes man-reservoir interaction, and we have these outbreaks. It's very important for us to be prepared. Maury, thank you for making this good background for this webinar. Now we move on over to you, Sam, to tell us more on how we can be better prepared. Yeah, over to you, Sam.
Thank you very much, dear Dr. Miriam, and of course as well to dear Dr. Maury, who gave the prior presentation. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Samuel Boland. Hopefully you are able to hear me okay. We've had some internet issues at the office. I work at the World Health Organization Regional Office for Africa, where I am a technical officer in the EPR, Emergency Preparedness and Response Cluster, specifically situated in EMP, Emergency Preparedness. And like Maury, I myself also have a significant background in preparing for and also responding to filovirus outbreaks, including Ebola in West Africa and Ebola in multiple outbreaks in Central and Eastern Africa as well. Today, I'm here to talk with you about a relatively new guiding document that has been developed and is available already online to help guide you, whether you're calling in from a country office, whether you're a representative of a Ministry of Health, whether you are a non-governmental organization or an interested implementing partner. And this document is intended to help provide you with the information that you need according to your local context to make sure that you know what the essential and actionable measures are to enhance country preparedness for viral hemorrhagic fever outbreaks in your country. I'll speak for about 20 minutes before turning to further speakers, and then we'll come back to some Q&A at a later time. So the background of this document really builds on many of the things that our dear colleague, Dr. Maury, was speaking about, which is that the African region faces a growing challenge in managing viral hemorrhagic fever outbreaks in the region. Now, going a bit beyond filoviruses specifically, this includes a range of very serious pathogens. So that includes Ebola and Marburg, but for the African region also includes Lassa, yellow fever, severe dengue, Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever, and also Rift Valley fever. Now, these viral hemorrhagic fevers taken together pose a very significant public health threat because they have high morbidity, high mortality, and as discussed previously, there is a high frequency of outbreaks, including outbreaks ongoing at this moment in time. So recognizing that as an urgent issue, the World Health Organization Regional Office for Africa has developed, and I present to you now, a comprehensive guide containing the preparedness measures that can be taken in the region to mitigate viral hemorrhagic fever risks. And the document, including an online companion tool, which I'll talk about in a little bit, is itself intended to be a practical tool. And we'll go through how that happens and how to use the tool. And it will therein offer actionable measures for member states to improve readiness and response capabilities by being better prepared. So the guide itself, and I'm hoping that our colleague, Dear Amarachi, can drop the links that I shared into the group for everyone to have access to the document. And if not, I'll do so immediately after my presentation. The guide consolidates and advances existing viral hemorrhagic fever guidelines by integrating recent scientific breakthroughs as well as lessons learned from past outbreaks. It provides specific high-impact steps for better preparedness. Now, those steps are in line with the Framework for Health Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Resilience, otherwise known as HEPA. They are aligned with One Health principles. They are aligned with the 717 target, and they are innovative and multi-sectoral. Very key aspects of that guide going over these preparedness steps include what we have called baseline preparedness measures. Now, those are measures that, regardless of a country's status, countries should have in place in order to ensure that they are able to best prepare for the different VHF risks that they face. In addition to these baseline measures, there are measures that are specific to different viral hemorrhagic fevers, which depend on the degree of epidemiological risk in a given country, because of course, not all countries face exactly the same risks according to different VHFs. So using this document, we can go through a few steps to develop your contingency plan for how to ensure that you are able to identify the critical interventions that you need to make in order to be best prepared. So as discussed, there is this big long list of essential and actionable preparedness measures. Those consider the prioritization in the country for that different VHF. They consider the key characteristics of each viral hemorrhagic fever, and they also consider the level of implementation of the preparedness measure. And what I mean by that is whether the measure is taken at the national level, the district level, or the community level. As discussed, they are in line with multi-sectoral and One Health principles, as well as HEPA. Taken together, you use this to then define a package of country-specific preparedness measures, and then you can compare that against the capacities that you already do have in place in your given country. The essentially gap analysis, the space between what you need and what you have, then forms the foundation of what can be your national contingency plan to ensure that you have specific steps that you know how to take in order to better prepare for these risks. Now, just again as a reminder, we are not just talking here about Ebola. This guide goes over the different VHFs that are affecting the African region, which, like I said, includes Ebola and also includes Marburg, filoviruses, the primary topic of the discussion that we're having today, but also, as discussed, includes Rift Valley fever, dengue, yellow fever, Lassa fever, and CCHF. Now, when it comes to these country prioritization levels, I referenced this a couple of slides ago. As you go and work through the guide, a priority level is assigned for each of those VHFs, for each of those viral hemorrhagic fevers in every single member state in the African region. Priority 1 would be the highest priorities countries. Those are countries that might be continuously or very frequently affected by a given viral hemorrhagic fever. Priority 2 would include countries that are not necessarily falling into that priority 1 category, but certainly are at an elevated risk. Priority 3 are those that might be at a moderately or minimally elevated risk. And priority 4 are countries that do not have an elevated priority. That is that while there may still be a risk of importation, for example, someone coming in with on a flight, they otherwise don't have significant factors that would significantly increase their risk above the risk that all countries might face at any given time. This prioritization is really key for reflecting the epidemiological burden in a given country, and also necessary in the document because countries that are at the higher priority levels should consider more robust preparedness measures. And we'll go through a little bit of that criteria and what I mean by more robust measures in a few slides. And as discussed for each of the different viral hemorrhagic fevers, including Ebola and Marburg, these 4 priority levels are defined for every country. So using that different prioritization, we can adjust preparedness. So we already described and discussed these baseline preparedness measures. Those are measures that every single country should have in place. So whether you're a priority 1 country, 2, 3, or 4, the baseline measures should always be there. These are essentially like your core minimum standard, your minimum package of a preparedness for these different threats. As you can see, for priority 3 countries, maybe you have somewhat enhanced preparedness measures. For priority 2, you might have even more enhanced. And then for priority 1, you might have very enhanced preparedness measures, given the different threats and the high risk of an outbreak that your country faces. So what does this actually look like? I've circled Marburg and Ebola as the filoviruses that we're talking about today. And within the document, which you'll have access to and is available online, as you can see, for each of these different VHFs, every single country in the African region has been assigned a suggested priority level going on the basis of historical transmission and also proximity to countries where there is a significant degree of either outbreak or zoonotic reservoirs. I won't go through these in detail because we already had an epi overview from Dr. Mori, but you can certainly go into the document, go down to the section where each of these maps are available to you, and compare and contrast how your country measures up against other countries in the region or other neighboring countries. We'll get onto in a moment how you can actually yourself decide that the suggested prioritization within this document is not aligned with what you think it needs to be. And there's a way to adapt the tool so that you at the country level or subnational level are able to make sure that the prioritization you need is adjusted so that you can make sure you have the preparedness measures that you need in order to be best prepared for these filovirus and other viral hemorrhagic fever outbreaks. Finally, and I'm going to get on in a minute to the measures themselves, the organization of the measures in the document are first disaggregated by the level of intervention. As referenced, that means that maybe some things are done at the national level, maybe some things are done at the district level, and maybe some things are done at the community level. For every single one of those measures, of which there are dozens in the document, there is also indicated the relevant viral hemorrhagic fever that the measure applies to. Some of the measures apply to all of them. Some of them only apply to one. For example, that might be about having a vaccination campaign for Rift Valley fever that only applies to Rift Valley fever. Each measure also indicates the relevance of the measure according to the assigned priority level, those country priority levels that we just talked about. Each measure also indicates the most relevant alignment with the HEPA framework and the 5 Cs of HEPA, and also indicates the responsible pillar that would be responsible within a typical emergency response framework or emergency preparedness framework for making sure that that capacity can be built as part of that national contingency plan. So essentially what this means is that to use the tool, there are 4 steps. One is to consider the baseline preparedness measures. That's those minimum standards that we were talking about. Again, remembering that those apply regardless of country and regardless of priority level. So you always have to start with those baseline measures. Then a priority level needs to be assigned for your country according to each of the viral hemorrhagic fevers. Now, like I said, we've suggested what those priorities should be based on some analysis, but you can adjust them as you need. So for each one, you're going to assign priority 1, 2, 3, or 4 based on your knowledge of your country context. Once you've assigned those priority levels, then you map those to the different preparedness measures that are specific to that VHF and that priority level. So you have these country-specific preparedness measures. These are preparedness measures above and beyond the baseline that are relevant for your country based on the prioritization that you've given for each of these VHFs. When you take those together, those baseline measures and those country-specific measures, you have your package of essential and actionable preparedness measures that are relevant for your country. The final step is then to assess your capacity in your country against that comprehensive list of measures and develop an action plan to fill any identified gaps. Now, all in, across the document, there are 52 measures, and these are cut across all different pillars of preparedness, readiness, and response. 37 of those measures are at the national level, 12 are at the district level, and 3 are at the community level. 29 of those measures are baseline, those which apply to all countries at all times. 23 of them depend on the viral hemorrhagic fever or the country prioritization level that you have assigned to that VHF in your given country. Every single measure is broken down into sub-steps and components, sort of like a readiness checklist. So what you can see on the screen in front of you is just a snapshot of just one measure. And that measure is to ensure at least one national reference laboratory can process high consequence pathogens. This is a baseline measure. All countries should ideally have this in place, and it's relevant for all viral hemorrhagic fevers. But as you can see, not only is there a tick that you can mark whether you have the National Reference Laboratory in place, but also there are each of the subsequent steps that you maybe need to think about in order to be sure that you actually do truly have that reference laboratory in place. And if not, that you can go through these steps to make sure that there is an effective national reference laboratory there and available to process these high consequence pathogens. So every single measure of those dozens of measures has this breakdown to provide you step by step by step a number of the different things that you need to think about. And you can indicate whether you already have it, whether you don't have it, or given your knowledge of your country, whether perhaps it's not applicable. Maybe a partner is able to provide one of these services, or maybe for some reason or another, it's not relevant for you. So you can also indicate NA for not applicable. Now, I won't go through each of the measures one by one by one. I do just want to quickly reflect on them and to show you just how many of them are relevant for filovirus preparedness. Now, again, depending on your country, because of that prioritization, it won't be that every single one of these needs to be in place unless you are a priority 1 or perhaps 1 or 2 country for filoviruses. But here you can get an idea of some of those measures that are relevant at the national level. So it could include developing a national VHF contingency plan that is revised at least biennially, so that would be every 2 years. It could be about assessing the relevant laws and legal frameworks and regulations that you need to go through to deal with VHF response. It could be about annually reassessing your standard operating procedures, protocols, plans, and so forth. or even about making sure that you are able to have engagement between different state actors, which may be, for example, includes implementing the WHO National Civil Military Health Collaboration Framework for strengthening health emergency preparedness. To go through these again still, and I just want to give you a bit of a flavor of these at each of the different levels. This could also include, like I said, ensuring that there's a national reference laboratory to process high consequence pathogens. It could include making sure that there's at least one ultra cold chain facility at the national level that has national distribution capacity. It could also include perhaps preventatively vaccinating essential health workers against the Ebola virus. Circled on this slide in front of you are not the ones which are especially relevant for filoviruses, but actually circling the ones which are not relevant for filoviruses. I would encourage you certainly to use the entirety of the document and include in that contingency planning all of these different VHF risks. So for example, up above, we have implementing the I strategy for eliminating yellow fever vaccination. Down below, we have developing a national vector surveillance and control management plan that includes ensures the inclusion of VHF risks. These, for example, are not relevant to Ebola and to Marburg, but certainly are recommended in countries where these are relevant and viable risks. Again, just skimming through, and then I'll get on to the exciting bit here, which is the online companion tool, which I'll walk through before turning over to our next speaker. You can see that these different measures at the national level include things related to ensuring buffer stops for vaccines, making sure that there's effective risk communication and community engagement, things related to partnership, like making sure there's a multi-sectoral coordination mechanism, and of course, making sure that there's a functional public health emergency operations center, as well as a plan for incident management for the different VHF risks that you face. It includes things like the development of rapid response teams and emergency medical teams, making sure that you have effective cross-border collaboration and coordination, making sure you have things like ethical compliance standards, and making sure that you're doing the necessary epidemiological analysis so that you can hit the ground running and move very quickly if you need to in the case of a VHF outbreak, including a filovirus outbreak. Moving ahead through these, because again, I would very much encourage you to go through them in the document, and I will get very boring very fast if I go through them one by one. You can see that there's a huge diversity and a huge number of these, and please do remember that for every single one of them, there is that very detailed step-by-step function that allows you to assess whether you do truly or do not yet have these functions and these preparedness measures in place. As discussed, depending on the prioritization level, these also are relevant at the district level. So here you can see that there are some district or subnational level measures. They could be, depending on your country, at the provincial level. It really depends on the organization of how your country is organized. And then moving through the district level measures and into community level measures, which are things that can include things like having good community-based surveillance and making sure as well that you have a package of enhanced WASH in areas that are deemed to be at high risk. Now, I know this is all a lot. So first of all, don't forget that every single measure, every single one of those bullet points over those past pages is something that has the step-by-step components in order to make sure that you can be guided to check your readiness and to make sure that for any missing preparedness capacity, you have the steps that you need to put that capacity and put that preparedness measure into place. I know this sounds like a lot because we're talking about, therefore, dozens and dozens and dozens of measures, which means dozens and dozens and dozens of pages with steps and so on and so forth. Now, the document, which is linked and online, is a fantastic reference tool to begin the process of ensuring that you can go through this process of developing your national contingency plan. To make this a lot easier for people that choose to do it this way, we have also launched an online companion tool. Now, the online companion tool essentially makes this process for you much more efficient and permits us to provide some additional analysis to the answers that you provide. So using the online companion tool, which is a public tool available on the internet, you can select a country, your country, from a drop-down list that will automatically suggest back to you the suggested priority level for each of the viral hemorrhagic fevers. You can then adjust them. Let's say that there's been a new outbreak or information has changed, or you decide at your level in your country that the suggested priority level is not correct. You can make that adjustment straight away right on that first page of the online tool. The system, the online tool, will then disregard going through any of the measures that are not relevant to your priority level. So for example, let's say that you are priority 4, very much not high priority for let's say for Rift Valley fever. Then probably it's not relevant for you to advance a vaccination campaign for Rift Valley fever. The tool will not even ask you. It will skip over this so as not to overwhelm you as we go through these one by one. Then for the measures that are relevant, those you can then go through and mark one by one as being something that is already in place in your country, is not in place in your country, or perhaps is not applicable. So you go through and you say, yes, we have a national reference laboratory. But no, we do not have a stockpile of Ebola vaccines to preventatively vaccinate some key essential workers. Or, you know what? I decide for my country that it's not relevant for me to have a district rapid response team. Perhaps I'm a very small country and I'm able to deploy those teams from the capital. So you go through and you mark yes, no, or not applicable. Then that system will disregard the measures that you marked as already in place or not applicable, the ones which are either already there or you don't think are relevant for your country. And then it will provide you with a comprehensive list of the measures that you have said that you need, that you do not have in place. And that is your package of country-specific measures that you have as a gap that you need to advance in order to be sure that you are fully prepared for the different viral hemorrhagic fever risks and including filovirus risks that you face in your country. It's really relatively straightforward. The link either has already been dropped or will be momentarily. And essentially, you can load it on your phone or your computer. As discussed, you select your country from the drop-down menu. You then confirm and adjust those priority levels, as we said. So for example, in this instance, Congo has been assessed as priority 2 for Rift Valley fever. You can agree or disagree, and if you disagree, you can provide the suggested priority level. As discussed, the tool then disregards the measures that are not relevant. It will then ask you, is it already in place? Is it not applicable? Is it partly in place, or is it not at all in place? As you can see on the screenshot on the right-hand side, one by one, it will ask you this in turn, going through those 50-odd, 55 measures. As discussed, it will then disregard those that are already in place or not applicable. And then for the relevant measures marked as not fully in place or not in place, it will then go through each of those sub-steps because some of those you'll have already completed, but maybe some you haven't. Using your answers, that then provides you with your national VHF contingency plan roadmap and also provides this presented in an interactive dashboard. Again, that is only for measures that are relevant to your VHF risks and your prioritization levels. It does not include the measures which you assess as not applicable. It does not include the measures that you already have in place. It is only those that you need that are not fully in place, and then they will be provided to you, including with the steps that you need for your national VHF contingency plan roadmap. This document, including the online associated companion tool, systematically lays out the necessary steps and strategies to enhance preparedness capabilities across the WHO African region, acknowledging the significant threat that these viral hemorrhagic fevers pose to public health, security, and economic stability. By assigning priority levels outlining baseline preparedness measures and delving into these VHF-specific measures, this guide serves as a really critical tool for you on this call, decision makers, health professionals, and partners in the fight against these diseases. So as countries utilize this document to compare their capacities and develop tailored contingency action plans, it is expected that the gaps in preparedness will close, thereby enhancing overall resilience and preparedness within the African region in its health systems against viral hemorrhagic fevers. Moving forward, it is crucial for all stakeholders, including WHO country offices, ministries of health, public health emergency operation centers, and external partners to remain vigilant, adaptive, and collaborative. Remember, of course, that preparedness is not a one-time effort. Preparedness is a continuous process of learning, in investing in our systems, and in improving. And as the African region faces the threat of emerging and re-emerging viral hemorrhagic fevers, the guidelines and measures outlined in this document should be iteratively reviewed and updated. Ultimately, the collective aim is to fortify our region against viral hemorrhagic fevers to help ensure the swift detection, the effective response, and the minimal impact on the lives and livelihoods of its people. Together, with sustained commitments and cooperation, we absolutely can aspire to a future where these VHFs are no longer a formidable threat, but a manageable aspect of our resilient public health systems. So thank you very much. I will stop sharing my screen and I will turn it back to dear Miriam to hand things over to our next speaker. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sam, for taking us through that guidance document. I think colleagues online, you can see the link in the chat and you can download this guideline and go through it yourselves, but also the online tool. It makes work a lot easier. So please use the online tool to select the disease that your country is at risk of, and you can go through the preparedness actions with ease. If you have any need for support, you can contact us for the support. I will now move on to Mamadou to tell us about the readiness actions by pillar. And this is important because we are already in a state of readiness. Most of the countries are really in this state of where we need to be ready. Over. Mamadou, to you.
Thank you, Dr. Miriam, and sincere welcome to all colleagues on the call. Thank you very much, Dr. Mori and Dr. Sam, for setting a very good scene to go into this aspect on now, the specific filovirus readiness and anticipatory actions. You agree with me that that was almost like a funnel. We went from the global to looking at broader preparedness for multiple viral hemorrhagic fevers. And now we look closely at very quick and fast set of actions that we will need to take to maintain what we call minimum operational readiness capacities, or actions that you're going to need as member states who are at actual imminent risk of these outbreaks. You'd agree with me that from the information we have in the African region, we are now Amarachi, could you help me share from your end? My slides seem to have stopped. We now have within the African region quite a few outbreaks of filoviruses. From September last year, we had an outbreak in Rwanda, and we have 2 already this year. Amarachi, could you put the slides up? So I'll take you as a background. There has been an Ebola and Marburg readiness checklist that has been developed in the past in Excel. We've moved forward a bit beyond that. We now have an online version, and it gives you a much more rapid ability to get your anticipatory actions back by analyzing the gaps and looking at where you have capacities that are missing, which would then quickly be translated into a quick set of readiness activities that you would need, especially in a situation where you know that you have outbreaks in your region and you may not have the luxury of time to think through for a very long period of time. Next slide, Amarachi. So I'm just going to show you a snapshot of the data from the dashboard. Of course, we did say, I did say that we had started with readiness assessments from the last quarter of last year when the first filovirus outbreak had occurred. We have countries that are neighboring to the current countries that have reported outbreaks, which we rapidly utilize our readiness checklists to do a quick assessment. This is self-administered by countries. We share the links through the WHO country office, and they sit with government counterparts and other partners and stakeholders within the country. We strongly encourage that it is done jointly, multi-sectorally, and through your coordination mechanisms as governments, such that expertise is all present in the room and the assessment is done as accurately as possible. Remember, this is to guide your contingency planning, your quick readiness actions, and of course, it will help you to identify supports that are needed. So overall, as you see on the screen, this is from our back end of the dashboard, the countries that are surrounding by land borders, the current countries reporting outbreaks have already filled, and the link is in the slideshow and will be shared with you through the chat and through the WHO country offices, including the presentation on quick anticipated readiness actions. You can see overall that from the set of countries that have filled at this stage, we have an overall across all pillars readiness across all so far filled countries of 60%. Really, we don't want colleagues in countries to be hung over on the score itself. It's just an indicative weighted score per pillar. However, it gives you a quick indication of which pillars really are not doing well and where your specific gaps are in your minimum operational requirements. As you can see, the pillars that are really on the lower end, least strong, are IPC, logistics, travels, point of entry, case management. But when you look at those bars, you will notice that none of them are in green. We expect adequate capacity to be 80% and above, and you can see across all pillars, across all countries that are filled, they're not yet at 80%. The strongest there would be rapid response teams capacities at 71%. And so this gives a quick indication as to what is consistent with what we're seeing in the outbreak, and we do share country-specific feedback, and we do have now even a subnational tool for countries to fill and look at their provinces, districts, counties. This is also consistent with what we had seen in the assessment in 2022 and 2024. IPC still is quite on the low side within the region. Next slide, please. And so I'm going to give you generic, quick actions that should be on your radar to take as soon as possible by pillar. And as Sam has mentioned, also aligned now by our HEPA framework of the 5 Cs. These actions are by no means prescriptive that all countries must do all of these actions, but as you do fill the readiness checklists, then we will be able to give you an analysis back and specific actions. The countries that have filled already have gotten specific actions back based on what are their gap areas. Next slide. So when we're talking about the first C, we're talking about coordination for response. And under coordination as a pillar of the incident management structure, we would require that countries establish coordination structures, including a national and also at the subnational level, local task forces. This could be the firm IMS, or it could be technical working groups, or it could be coordination task forces. And that would be responsible for management of the event. Now, those teams then may need to be retrained in the command and control structure of coordination in times of an outbreak. We have a large cache of cache of WHO documents that can be quickly adapted, and these have been jointly done with many of our other member organizations, other partner organizations, sorry. Definitely, we would like that immediately SOPs and templates for weekly reporting, including for cross-border sharing and surveillance, are established. Surveillance and information sharing also at the point of entry would be key. Conduct of simulation exercises, as Sam has mentioned, you would need a VHF specific contingency plan, but a plan is just a document. You are only as good as the capacity to implement the actions in those plans in a rapid fashion. So a contingency plan tests your capabilities to implement. Next slide, please. Now, in collaborative surveillance, we'll run through, it's quite a large area. Ensure that the case definitions are adapted in your country context. WHO does have broad guidance on case definitions. Retraining of health workers and surveillance officers on both MVD and FVD, the filoviruses, including in active case search, and ensuring that they have adapted SOPs down to the lowest level. Ensure community reporting orientation is conducted for focal persons to report suspected cases. You need to have a large pool of people that can conduct contact tracing in all, especially your high-risk regions. Now, this can include your community health workers, your CSO, civil society organizations, NGOs that are available extra manpower in the community and district or the third level. Early warning systems need to be activated, including ensuring that you have ability to verify alerts and investigate within 24 to 48 hours. And not to forget One Health, you also need to be sure that you have on board your environment and wildlife, as well as your agriculture and livestock colleagues. Rapid response teams, the high-risk districts to start should at least have one trained rapid response team supported with adequate logistics, transportation mechanisms, and adequate PPEs for their activities. Next slide, please. Still under collaborative surveillance, the second C, laboratory readiness, you need to have sample collection, handling, and transportation. So each high-risk district at the minimum. And we are emphasizing high-risk districts because we do know that resources are not unlimited. And so a country needs to go through a level of risk assessment to identify risks according to either geographic proximity to where outbreaks are, or having large points of entry that could be a portal for entry of the infectious hazard. So ensuring that you have SOPs and training and prepositioning materials, triple packaging for transportation of samples is key. Sam has mentioned about national laboratory capacity, but we would like to ensure that at the minimum, even if the country cannot at this imminent stage start establishing national reference laboratories, there's need to at least have sample transportation mechanisms. There's need to have identified regional reference labs where you have MOUs that you could share your samples for support to test and give rapid results. Also, in relation to that, ensure that you have personnel trained with IATA certification for packing and shipping of samples. We don't want biosecurity issues where Improper shipping of samples create new chains of transmission because of a break of IPC measures. Ensure that you have packaging and courier arrangements in place in case this is for international shipments. So these, if it is couriers, it has to be certified to be able to handle highly infectious pathogenic samples. One Health is key. You've heard the context of how the virus is spread. So we need that you ensure each high-risk district has an established means for sample collection handling to the national reference labs, including for your animal sector. Now, we mentioned this because we do know that the bats, the Rosatus bat is the known reservoir, but there are also slight possibilities of viral amplification in other intermediate reservoirs. So your One Health colleagues need to be well integrated and also implementing biosafety measures to prevent bats from introducing Marburg into other animal populations, and including at community level RCCE towards preventing behaviors that would promote animal to human transmission. So we go into the third HEPA C, that is community awareness and protection. You need to map your priority and vulnerable groups. So you do map your high-risk districts, provinces, counties, states, but also map groups that may particularly be at risk. These could be border communities. These could be mining communities that work in caves. They could also be transportation unions or groups that may take infections across borders via transportation corridors. Ensure that at community level, your coordination mechanisms are activated for instant reporting and early response. Ensure at community level, your community listening systems are up to date, capturing feedback. You do know situations where misconceptions, myths around outbreaks have had devastating effects on even established Ebola or Marburg treatment units or even cholera treatment units by communities not accepting these in their midst. Ensure you have your communication channels mapped and updated, including your media workers, health workers, your local government officials, and very importantly, community and religious leaders and traditional healers. You do know that many cases would visit multiple of these before actually seeking orthodox care in a formal hospital. Ensure you have tailored messaging. You develop, you test, and you develop and you deliver evidence-based messaging. Within WHO, our RCC and community protection colleagues have message banks which can easily be adapted to country-specific contexts. It's just for colleagues to reach out. Use your anthropologic data, social behavioral data to adapt the messaging according to your local context needs. Ensure your networks of community engagement are retrained in the highest risk areas and roll out to other areas as required. These teams must include your community workers, your leaders, your sexual health services providers, and where possible, if you can deploy anthropologists. WASH and IPC in communities need to be strengthened, especially in convergence areas and high burden or high concentration of population areas. Remember your schools and ensure hand hygiene stations at the minimum with soap and water, alcohol-based rubs are available. Ensure the update of your SOPs for cleaning and disinfection. In especially your highest burden districts, the SOP for ambulance cleaning and disinfection must be clear and disseminated to ambulance teams. IPC ring approaches, and there's a link in the presentation so you can access IPC guidelines for Marburg and Ebola disease. Should be adapted and your community teams familiarized. Safe and dignified burials. These teams can be highly vulnerable if they do not have the medical supplies they need. So the ETU should have medical supplies not only for case management, but appropriate for management of at least prepositioned for 5 EVD or MVD cases. Ensure your SDV teams are constituted. So each high-risk district should have at least one with a dedicated vehicle for transportation, and map your local partners that you can do this with. Ensure you have stocks of PPE and especially body bags so that the burials can be safe. Ensure that these teams also identify appropriate locations for their decontamination and safe disposal of the PPE and medical waste, especially in your highest risk districts. The SOPs for decontamination are available and they can be provided for adaptation by country teams. Now we come to points of entry. Ensure you have, especially at your highest risk points of entry, equipment for screening and referral. Integration into early warning systems. Remember that the points of entry and their surrounding communities are a highly vulnerable aspect. They're usually furthest away from the central level, and as such, they may not have as much services as closer districts to the central level, as well as they're quite integrated with neighboring countries. And so you do know that for almost every one formal border, you may have up to 100 to 500 informal borders that are not manned. And that makes your border communities your line of defense. So strengthening your risk communications with them is key to ensure that they act like your surveillance to report any unusual illnesses in their midst. Strengthening the cross-border surveillance and collaboration is key, in line with IHR Article 6. You need to also work with your organizations that look closely at migration and cross-border movements. This may include your immigrations, your customs, and other agencies. Within the UN, of course, the Institute on the IOM is the key on population mobility mapping, DTMs, displacement tracking matrices, and so working with them through your incident management or task forces is key to look at what other corridors are there aside your formal ground crossings, what travel corridors are there, and what measures for public health need to be instituted at those corridors. Ensure that the especially designated and high-risk districts have POE contingency plans, and review and update for the filovirus scenario planning. These POEs, by nature, are not able to manage or act as isolation units. So a referral system must be in place with trained ambulance teams from these POEs to a mapped facility for safe evacuation and keeping the patient safe. As I mentioned earlier, you spread your IEC materials, you interact with your communities at the borders, especially in local languages they can understand. For clinical care, I will try and pick up the speed. Case management, IPC, and WASH. Of course, your coordination mechanisms for IPC, whether it's IPC committees or focal persons or task forces, need to be activated. They need to have updated MVD protocols and guidelines. These need to be disseminated to the lowest level. As you saw with our readiness assessment, IPC really is one of the weakest links within the region. And so these need to be done imminently. Establish isolation units. This could be repurposed within an existing treatment center, or if you have access to set up temporary isolation units, and ensure that it is within reach of a functionable ambulance. The most at-risk countries, we would need at least one ETU in each high-risk country is established with the appropriate PPEs. Ambulance and transport, each of these ETUs must have a capable team to transport from surrounding and the referral facilities.
Please try to move quickly here.
Okay, I'm trying to round up here. IPC does have a rapid assessment scorecard. Ensure you also have screening and triage systems in place. Posters for your filoviruses need to be even in areas that are not for isolation. You need to use opportunities to educate the public, ensure that IPC needs assessments are done, and of course, you need the relevant staff to be trained in IPC and WASH, including donning and doffing. Ensure that the isolation units have adequate wash facilities, including sources of water and also toilets, which could be segregated male and female. A new area we have within our systems is continuity of essential services. From COVID experience, we do know that these can be easily disrupted. So health service continuity plans need to be done. We have added health facility risk assessments, and we have a strategic tool for risk assessment for hospitals. We call them STAR-H, which can lead to development of a plan per health facility, anticipating surges and anticipating disruptions. Of course, you need to ensure the wellness of your workforce, including identifying surge that can support. In OSL, this speaks to many things I've said in other pillars as well, ensuring you have a storage and distribution plan, you have forecasts, you have assessments of your facilities, and you have health logistics coordination. Our last area is research and innovation. Now, we've seen recently with Uganda the effect of having pre-arranged support for regulatory and ethical approvals for new protocols and new innovative treatment devices. They've had clinical trials approvals set up quite quickly. So these are available to be adapted for your IRBs and ethics committees. And as cases start to appear, you can then rapidly be able to deploy new therapeutics. I'd like to stop here, and hopefully we can discuss more during the Q&A. Thank you, Dr. Miriam, and I hand back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mamadou, for those for that presentation highlighting many measures that we can put in place. And countries, colleagues from countries, really we request that you look at these and take them into consideration depending on the level of risk in your country. Because if you get a filovirus outbreak and you don't have many of these requirements in place, it becomes really a headache to set up an effective response. So we hope that this is useful to you as individuals and as countries. Now we will open up for a session, 15-20 minutes of question and answer. Please, we'll put up your hand and you'll open your microphone to give your comment or question. Also, you can go ahead and use the Q&A. Several questions in Q&A have been answered. Please look there. It gives more information on some of the issues being raised. Okay, we'll start with Mike Lawal. Mike, can you open your mic, please, and ask your question? Is Mike there? Can we go to Adebodo? Adebodo, can you open your mic, please, and ask your question?
All right, thank you so much. Very excellent presentations. Yeah, my question is actually on the chat box, and it has to do with the early case detection, which I believe is very paramount for effective Lassa fever outbreak response. However, the absence of a reliable rapid diagnostic kit has presented a significant challenge, because when the cases don't get presented early at the treatment facility, the outcome are always, very, very bad. So what I want to find out again is what efforts are being undertaken by WHO Afro region, to help address this critical need. Like we had during the COVID-19 outbreak response, those rapid diagnostic kits were very helpful in early detection. Thank you, and over.
Okay, thank you. Sam, you'll be thinking through the answer while we go to Marilyn. Marilyn, please. Marilyn, open your mic and ask your question. Marilyn Otto. Can you open your mic? Okay, the hand is down. Now we go to Hamadi. Hamadi, please. Open your mic and ask your question. Wow. Okay, Sam, you can start off answering the question on rapid diagnostic tests for Lassa fever.
Yeah, of course. And I will also, if Dr. Mori is online, when I've said a few words, I would also very much invite Dr. Mori to come in and provide some information on diagnostics for Lassa. It's not my specialization, but
okay.
what I can say is that the WHO, both at the regional office and also through our country office in Nigeria and other Lassa affected and at-risk countries, is very involved in making sure that Lassa fever preparedness as well as diagnostics are incorporated into the overall health system strengthening. So that very much means working on scaling up outbreak response and coordination, including through the empowerment and capacitation of public health emergency operation centers. It includes advising national authorities on strengthening infection prevention and control, of course, community engagement and hygiene promotion, and also laboratory support and diagnostics, because as stated, the rapid identification of cases when and as they occur is critical for ensuring the ability to provide quick treatment and to save lives. I'm hoping, dear Mari, I see that you've taken off your camera. Put on your camera.
So
if you're able to come in a little bit on this question of diagnostics for Lassa.
I'm very sorry because I'm multitasking. Just to
no problem.
Remind
the
everyone
question
that
specifically
I'm
was
the response, the mpox response in the DRC, so I'm multitasking. Okay, what was the question, please?
The question was related to the efforts being undertaken by WHO Afro for Lassa fever diagnostics and the rapid diagnostics for Lassa fever in Lassa. Yeah, for Lassa fever.
Okay, so regarding the RDTs for Lassa fever, what I know is that there was a clinical trial ongoing in the DRC, in Nigeria. I think it has already been maybe concluded because the preliminary result have shown maybe high sensitivity and specificity. And I think one of the, if I'm not mistaken, an article has been published in the Lancet, and I think it's in process. So it's going to be maybe approved and so on, and now maybe disseminated widely. But for the moment, it's not yet the case, but it's in process. This is what I know for the moment. So as I don't know if it's this response to the question or not. Yeah, over.
Okay, thank you. As you all know that development of these diagnostics, just like other countermeasures, requires a lot of research and development. So, and it's a process. So that process is ongoing for one of those. We hope that it will be successful and it can be deployed in the shortest time possible. But also we were at a meeting recently with the researchers where we were encouraging more people to work on products for some of these high priority pathogens beyond Ebola, Marburg, and COVID, because we realized that not many products were being worked upon or developed in line with this. But we hope that in this year, or maybe shortest time possible, we'll have something for Lassa fever, and maybe in the near future, more things for the other viral hemorrhagic fevers, because really rapid diagnostic tests is the preferred to make sure that we have quick detection. Yeah, okay. Mike, are you back or not yet? When Mike is not back, I'll request that we answer some of the questions that are in the chat, rather in the Q&A, but we bring them out to the main session because they are important. One of the questions was, why is IPC pillar doing the poorest? What are the main gaps? And this is to Mamadou. What can be done? Why is IPC least prepared? Among the least prepared pillars. Over to you, Mamadou.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miriam. I attempted to answer in the Q&A. IPC requires several structural, procedural, behavioral, and as well as supplies to make it effective. The major thing required there is very coordinated leadership. This is encouraged through IPC committees, IPC task forces. And all of these, from our observations, require intensive resources. Now, member states may not all have the same amount of resources to do those mechanical adjustments, ensure the printing of the kind of materials, ensure a continuous flow of supplies with no stock out, as well as the human element around really changing behaviors. There's a lot of behavior change that needs to happen, even among health workers, both in service and pre-service, to ensure that IPC is maintained. So this requires some concerted efforts. There are many assessment tools and there are many guidance documents on establishing an IPC program. And this can be shared with colleagues within the countries, but aggressive resource mobilization is needed from the governments first, and then with that leadership, other partners and other organizations can also help to try and boost this. But this is consistently a problem, not just across filoviruses. We've seen it in other hazards assessments as well. IPC and WASH is something that really requires intensive resources. Back to you.
Thank you. If I may add, IPC in summary is a health systems issue. We need supplies, we need structural changes, we need behavioral changes, we need a trained workforce, and a workforce that is motivated to do the right thing. As EPR, we can do our component, but we need to work very closely with the health systems colleagues to ensure that these IPC measures are sustained and become a way of work in the health systems. Otherwise, it is leading to a lot of health workers being exposed to these viruses whenever outbreaks occur and patients come to the health facilities. So I think that it's a health systems issue and we all need to work together on this. Okay. Then there was another question about Ebola antigenic variation. Maybe this is another question that either Sam or Maury can address in the plenary here.
What was the question, please? Antigenic variation, you said?
Ebola antigenic, is there Ebola antigenic variation at this time? Does it affect diagnosis? Sequencing studies being done? Maybe you can broadly talk about the different Ebola antigens and.
No, I think Ebola is well known now. There is a number of studies conducted in this area. Fundamental epidemiological research have been done, and the strain are well known. So if you take now, I think the new ICD, so International Disease Classification, we are now calling all the Ebola diseases as Ebola diseases. Now, it's not, in the past, for example, we were calling all the Ebola as Ebola virus disease. Now it has changed. Ebola virus disease now refer to Zaire strain. And this strain is well known, well documented in the DRC, in other regions like in Guinea and others, so on. So we also know the different strain, but for the moment, there is no issue, antigenic variation, impacting on the diagnostic, no. Because apart from the gene expert used for the diagnostic of Ebola on the field, we have the PCR, the qPCR are used, and we also have in some countries like DRC or Uganda, there is a platform they call multiplex. So, using like different filoviruses and other viruses. So, which means that I think we have capacity today to diagnose like Ebola, different strain, Sudan virus, and so on. So if I may answer this question, I will say no, there is no issue that is related to antiviral mutation on Ebola. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Then there was one question that was, that Ebola, the risk factors for transmission of this Ebola Marburg, they seem to be in some countries and not others. And why? But if you look at what Sam has written, very important answer. But I also wanted to say that from history, we have seen, like we had already seen Ebola in Uganda and the DRC and Congo, and we thought it was mainly a Central African issue. Then we were surprised by a big outbreak of Ebola in Sierra Leone, Liberia, Guinea. And that was the first time maybe they were having such a big outbreak, especially Sierra Leone and Liberia. So while we say it is the Central African countries, Guinea, we can easily see it in a new place because of reservoirs. We did a study in Uganda following the reservoirs for Ebola. This was Ebola Zaire, I think, and we tagged the bats in one location. And we found the bats in completely different locations after different months, after a number of months. So they were moving. If you try to find them here, they move to the next. Or if the weather is not favorable here, they move to another place. So you wouldn't be surprised if you diagnose Ebola in Kenya or diagnose Ebola in Tanzania, wherever, because of either movement of people or even movement of reservoirs. And that's why it is important, as we are all here in Africa, to try and be more ready for such an outbreak. Over. Are there any other questions? If there are no other questions, any last comments from the presenters? Sam, any last comment? Mamadou, any last comment before we move to the next steps?
Nothing for me, only to say thank you.
Okay, thank you.
On my end, I'm sharing the link for a call for research on border entry and exit screening from countries. From a border perspective, there was some confusion in the past on what WHO's recommendation was around this. Just to clarify, the WHO is a science-based organization, so it needs evidence to give recommendations on effectiveness of some measures. So there's a call that all the great data countries have collected from Ebola, from COVID, please publish so that we have better evidence to guide. Thank you, Dr. Miriam.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we'll move now to the next steps. Over to you, Alice.
Thank you, Dr. Miriam, and thank you, colleagues. My colleague, Dr. Ibrahim, have taken us through the readiness actions by pillars. So to conclude this webinar, I'm going to take you through the key readiness actions, what we need to do right now, the quick actions that we're able to do in this time that the continent is reporting ongoing outbreaks of filovirus disease. So the first action that we're supposed to do now is to increase awareness on filovirus disease and also to have a working case definition, especially a simplified case definition for community that need to be shared, and also to enhance active surveillance and ensure that the rapid response teams are ready for deployment. And in this one, we have to work together with our partners, especially in the state where we are sharing borders with with countries which have ongoing outbreaks. We also have to preposition equipment and supplies, VHF kits and testing kits for filovirus. We have to make sure that we in the countries, we have these things available. We don't wait for the outbreak to happen before we start requesting for supplies. The next is contingency planning for an imported filovirus scenario. We know that some of the priority countries already have contingency plans which were developed during the Rwanda outbreak. So what we are advising now is to update your contingency plan to this current context. The next is in-country technical assistance. We know that countries have many partners which are operating in countries. Other line ministries are part of Ministry of Health. So we need to make sure that we have mapped all our technical capacities in the countries by pillars, if it is communication, surveillance, lab, and also safe and dignified barriers. The next action is to conduct the readiness assessment using the filovirus readiness checklist. We are working now with the priority countries for filovirus, which are around 10 countries. And we appreciate the countries which have already filled their readiness checklist. So we also encourage other countries to fill the filovirus checklist, and we are ready to share it with you. The next action is to develop a preparedness and response plan, especially a 72 hours plan. So this is something that we're still working with priority countries to share this 72 hours plan with us, which is costed. We want to make sure that we are ready in case an outbreak has been confirmed in a country, that we have a workable 72 hours plan. Next is to map the available resources. I talked previously about mapping technical expertise which are available in the country. We also need to map available resources. We know that some partners have resources. We need to know where are these resources, with whom, and is which location. And we need to make sure that these resources are available at our priority areas. And lastly is to conduct a simulation exercise, or TTX, to test the plans that we have developed. Next step for filovirus. For the 9 priority countries which have already submitted their readiness checklist, we have shared with you actions by pillars, and also we have summarized some actions for some countries. So we really want you to look at the feedback that we share you and the action, and you use this action to update your contingency plan, cost it, and also share it with us. So we know that some countries have already called for a meeting to share the feedback by pillar, having all the pillars there, but we're also calling all the other countries which have not planned for this to plan for this as soon as possible. And also to develop and update preparedness and response, a 72 hours plan. As I said earlier, we are just still waiting for these priority countries to share with us their 72 hours plan, and also to map their resources. As I said earlier, both resources available with partners and resources available with government. Where are these resources? And we need, for this one, we need to focus on the high priority areas, especially states, districts which are neighboring countries which are reporting cases now with ongoing outbreaks. We also need to preposition supplies, VHF kits and testing kits. Usually what happens in other outbreaks is when there is suspected cases, then the countries will start writing, requesting for testing kits. So this is high time for the priority countries to make sure that they have VHF kits and testing kits available in the high-risk counties or districts. And to conduct screening at point of entry. We appreciate that some of the countries have already started doing screening at the point of entry, but we also encourage the other countries to start doing the screening, and also to enhance surveillance and capacity building at point of entries, especially in the high-risk areas. And lastly, to conduct, at this time, you can conduct TTX. You don't need to do drills, but also only a small TTX to test your plan and operational readiness, to identify the gaps so that you can address the gaps. The other things that I want to announce is that for filovirus readiness, we are going to have a OSL webinar, which is under the title Strengthening OSL Readiness for Filovirus Disease. This webinar is happening on Friday, the 14th of February, 11 o'clock Nairobi time. The link has already been shared with all of you, so we encourage all the countries, even if you are not an OSL expert, it will be also good for you to attend this webinar. And another thing, we are having a webinar on climate change tomorrow. It's the same time, 2 o'clock Nairobi time. So we also encourage all of you to attend the webinar, because we're going to talk about leveraging meteorological data for predicting climate-related health emergencies to strengthen readiness and enhance readiness. So this is all from my side. Thank you, and over to you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alice, for that. Colleagues, we are looking at the next steps to enhance our readiness. And this is real, because we need to be ready with all this that needs to be done. I know that in some countries, screening at POEs has taken quite some time because of lack of readiness. So we need to ensure that we are better prepared, we are better ready for such outbreaks. So we hope that you have picked a thing or two from this webinar and that you will make use of the information to enhance preparedness at the country level. I want to thank you, the presenters, for all this information shared, and I hope that it will be put to good use at country level. In terms of stockpiles, if you need to preposition a few staff at relevant points, you can contact our regional logistics hub here. They have some staff in store. They can deliver to you at a short notice. You can have a few for a little stock at country level at relevant points, and then you can order more to come to your way in case of an outbreak. It takes roughly 3 days to get the supplies from our regional logistics store hub here in Nairobi. In terms of the checklist, I think they have shared the link for the readiness checklist. Many times it can even be shared again on the chat. Alice and Mamadou, please put the checklist for readiness again on the chat, and please use it to assess your readiness. It's not to assess just for the sake of sharing with WHO, but it is to assess, to find your strengths, but also areas of weaknesses or gaps that you can address. Recently, we talked to a country that said, we assessed the capacities and we stopped there. So we don't want you to stop there, please. When you assess or identify gaps, you make a plan to address those gaps. And then it is important you have your 72-hour plan ready to guide you on how you would take off in case you have a confirmed case in your country. These are some of the key things that you need to really think through. We are available at your service to support you where you need our technical support. With that, I want to thank all of you for your participation. I want to thank all of you for your attention. We'll go ahead and share the presentations and the links and the guidance documents and the recording for your use. Thank you very much. And I bring this webinar to a close now. God bless and best regards. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.